Paris, 1855. Emperor Napoleon III is hosting a state dinner. The most honored guests are eating with utensils made of a strange, ultralight, brilliantly shining metal. The lesser nobles at the table are stuck with pure gold. The prized metal was aluminum. Today, you wrap your leftovers in it and throw it away. But the story of how this metal became the most precious substance on Earth begins long before the French Empire. To understand the aluminum paradox, you have to look at the ground beneath your feet. Aluminum is the most abundant metal in the Earth's crust. It makes up about 8% of the total weight of the solid planet you are standing on right now. It is everywhere. It is in the clay, in the ordinary rocks, in the dirt under your fingernails. But you have probably never seen a piece of natural, pure aluminum in your life. Neither did ancient man. The reason is chemical. Aluminum is a deeply reactive element. It bonds to oxygen with an almost supernatural tenacity. When exposed to air, it instantly forms a microscopic shield of oxide, locking itself away inside the rock. For millions of years, this metal sat hidden in plain sight, trapped inside the very stones that paved the earth. Ancient civilizations did not know the metal existed, but they knew its compounds. In ancient Greece and Rome, people used a specific salt they called alumen. We know it today as aluminum sulfate. They did not have laboratories. They did not understand molecular structures, but they realized that drying certain types of volcanic clay and treating it with acid produced a white, powdery substance that had miraculous properties. It was the baking soda of the ancient world. They used it to stop bleeding, to treat skin ulcers, as an astringent to tighten tissue, and most importantly, to dye fabrics. The Roman author Pliny the Elder wrote extensively about alumen, describing how it was essential for creating the vibrant colors that signified wealth and power in Rome. Without alumen, the bright purple and red dyes of antiquity would simply wash away in the river. The Romans harvested it from volcanic islands in the Mediterranean, processing the raw earth through a brutal system of leaching and boiling. They were manipulating aluminum chemistry without ever knowing the metal was hiding inside. The process was grueling. Workers would gather the alum-bearing rock, crush it by hand, and roast it over open fires for days. They would then dissolve the powder in water, filter out the impurities through rough cloth, and slowly boil the liquid down until the crystals formed. It was back-breaking labor that yielded a product essential to the ancient economy. But the pure metal itself remained entirely out of reach, locked inside the very dirt beneath their feet, until a European scientist decided to break it free. Before anyone held a piece of pure aluminum, the compound itself built an empire. By the 15th century, the textile industry was the engine of Europe, and textile dyeing was impossible without alum. For centuries, the sole source of high-quality alum was the Middle East, controlled by the Ottoman and Byzantine empires. The trade routes were heavily guarded, and the prices were staggering. European monarchs realized that their entire clothing industry was essentially held hostage by foreign powers. If the alum stopped flowing, the dyeing stopped, and the economy ground to a halt. But in 1461, a merchant named Giovanni di Castro made a discovery that shifted the balance of power. He found massive deposits of alumite rock in the volcanic hills of Tolfa, near Rome. This was not just a business opportunity. It was a geopolitical earthquake. Pope Pius II realized that whoever controlled the Tolfa alum mines controlled the European clothing industry. The Papal States seized the mines immediately. They established a strict monopoly that would last for centuries. To dye a piece of cloth in Europe meant paying a tax to the Pope. This monopoly generated unimaginable wealth. It funded the construction of St. Peter's Basilica. It paid for mercenary armies to defend the Papal States. It financed the Renaissance itself. The papacy became the aluminum king of the 15th century, ruling over a mountain of rock and dictating the terms of trade to every kingdom on the continent. They guarded the secret of the Tolfa mines with their lives, threatening excommunication to anyone who tried to steal the rock or break the monopoly. The penalty for smuggling alum was death. They had the compound, and they had the power. But while the papal monopoly made them rich, the pure metal inside that rock was still considered impossible to isolate. It would take a scientific breakthrough centuries later to finally free the metal from the stone. The breakthrough finally came in 1825 in Copenhagen. A Danish physicist named Hans Christian Ørsted performed a dangerous experiment. He heated aluminum chloride with potassium amalgam, creating a violent chemical reaction. The result was a small amount of grey powder. It was impure. It was ugly. It looked like dirt. But it was the first isolated aluminum the world had ever seen. The door was open, but barely cracked. 2 years later, a German chemist named Friedrich Wöhler improved the process. He managed to produce the first actual flakes of pure aluminum. It was a historic moment, but the yield was microscopic. It took Wöhler 20 years of refining his process just to produce enough aluminum to make a small button. The metal was a scientific curiosity, locked inside laboratories, traded between chemists like a mythical artifact. It was the philosopher's stone of the modern era, real but entirely inaccessible. The encounter with the wider world happened in 1854. A French chemist named Henri-Étienne Sainte-Claire de Ville found a way to produce aluminum in larger, though still limited, quantities using sodium instead of potassium. He presented his findings to the French Academy of Sciences, and almost immediately, the attention of Emperor Napoleon III was caught. Napoleon was obsessed with modernity, military advantage, and prestige. He saw this light, silver metal, and envisioned lightweight armor, faster cannons, and an empire elevated by science. He ordered de Ville to build a massive factory and produce the metal at any cost. This decision seemed small at the time. It was not. By pouring state funds into the factory, Napoleon inadvertently created the first aluminum industry in the world, turning a laboratory oddity into a symbol of supreme power. What followed was an era of absolute, unbridled obsession with a metal that practically no one could afford. Because aluminum was so difficult and expensive to produce, it became the ultimate status symbol. It was not treated as an industrial metal. It was treated as a rare jewel, a wonder of modern alchemy. The price was astronomical. In the 1850s, a pound of aluminum cost over $500. Adjusted for modern inflation, that is well over $15,000 for a single pound of a metal you currently use to wrap a sandwich. The absurdity of this luxury era is staggering. When Napoleon III hosted his state dinners, he distributed aluminum cutlery and plates only to his most distinguished guests, people like the King of Siam or the Viceroy of Egypt. The lesser nobles, the dukes and barons, had to settle for pure gold. The message was clear. Gold was common. Gold was for the masses. Aluminum was for gods. The emperor even had an aluminum helmet designed for his personal use, believing it offered superior protection. When the French imperial prince was born, the city of Paris gifted him a rattle made of pure aluminum. It was considered a treasure fit for a future emperor, a toy more valuable than the entire estates of most French aristocrats. The metal was not rejected by society, but it was rejected by practicality. It was so valuable that jewelers set aluminum into necklaces and tiaras, placing it right alongside rubies and diamonds. Women of high society wore aluminum brooches as a sign of ultimate wealth. It was the diamond of the industrial age. Even the United States got caught up in the craze. In 1884, the government was finishing the Washington Monument. They needed a capstone that would not tarnish, a metal that would stay brilliant forever. They chose aluminum. At the time, the small aluminum pyramid placed on top of the monument weighed about 100 ounces. It was the largest piece of aluminum ever cast. An American engineer named William Frischmuth was paid $225 to produce it. That was the equivalent of a day's wage for a skilled laborer for several months. The world was treating a structural metal like a diamond. But the clock was already running on this gilded age. And here is where the story gets dark for the monopolies. The year was 1886. Two men, separated by an ocean, were working on the exact same problem. Charles Martin Hall was a 22-year-old recent graduate working in a wooden shed behind his family home in Ohio. Paul Héroult was a 22-year-old student in Paris. Neither knew the other existed. Within months of each other, they both filed patents for the exact same process. The coincidence is almost supernatural. Both men were born in 1863. Both men died in 1914. But in 1886, they both discovered the secret that would shatter the aluminum empire. They discovered that if you dissolved aluminum oxide in molten cryolite and passed a massive electrical current through it, the liquid aluminum would separate and pool at the bottom of the tank. It was called the Hall-Héroult process. It was a chemical breakthrough that would change the planet, but it required one thing in massive quantities: electricity. The price of aluminum collapsed almost overnight. The metal that Napoleon used for his plates suddenly became cheaper than copper. Hall went on to found the Pittsburgh Reduction Company, which later became Alcoa, the first aluminum giant. But the process demanded so much power that aluminum plants had to be built next to massive sources of electricity. In 1895, Alcoa built a massive plant at Niagara Falls. They harnessed the raw power of the falling water to tear aluminum from the rock. The environmental toll was immediate. Producing a single ton of aluminum required immense amounts of electricity, often generated by burning coal, and it left behind toxic red mud, a byproduct of refining bauxite ore that destroys ecosystems and pollutes rivers. The quest for bauxite sent empires scrambling for land in places like Jamaica, Guinea, and Australia. The light metal was leaving a very heavy footprint on the world, and this sudden abundance was about to reshape the modern world in ways nobody could have predicted. If you are finding this history interesting, subscribe to the channel. Here at Common Lore, we tell stories like this every week, and you won't want to miss what comes next. The sudden availability of cheap, lightweight aluminum completely redrew the map of human ambition. For centuries, engineers had been trapped by the weight of iron and steel. You could build a steam engine, but it was too heavy to fly. Aluminum broke that barrier. In 1903, when the Wright brothers built their first airplane, the engine block was custom cast from aluminum. It was the only metal light enough to allow the craft to leave the ground. That single engine block launched the aviation industry. By the time the First World War erupted, aluminum was a strategic military asset. Governments realized that whoever controlled the skies controlled the war, and whoever controlled aluminum controlled the skies. During the Second World War, the demand for aluminum exploded beyond anything DeVille or Napoleon could have imagined. The United States alone produced hundreds of thousands of tons of aluminum for bomber aircraft. The government literally subsidized the construction of massive smelting plants across the country, building an industrial complex overnight. Aluminum was so critical to the war effort that it was rationed to civilians. The production of the B-29 Superfortress, the plane that would eventually drop the atomic bombs, required massive amounts of aluminum skin to cover its enormous frame. When the war ended, these massive factories needed a new purpose. The infrastructure built to crush the Axis powers was suddenly redirected toward commercial products: aluminum cans, aluminum foil, aluminum siding. The military-industrial complex became the kitchen-industrial complex. But the transformation from wartime necessity to everyday household item required one final massive leap in scale. Today, the aluminum industry operates on a scale that defies human comprehension. We produce over 70 million metric tons of primary aluminum every single year. It is the second most used metal in the world, behind only iron. You encounter it constantly. You drink from it, you fly in it, you frame your windows with it. And that is the part that catches people by surprise. Most people think of aluminum as the flimsy foil in their kitchen drawer, but it is a critical component of modern technology in ways you never see. The screens of the smartphone in your pocket rely on ultra-thin layers of aluminum oxide to function as a scratch-resistant glass. When a space shuttle launches, the solid rocket boosters are powered by burning aluminum powder. It is literally the fuel that pushes humanity into space. The metal that once crowned the Washington Monument as a symbol of pristine wealth is now pulverized and burned to escape Earth's gravity. The microscopic oxide layer that forms on its surface makes it corrosion resistant, meaning it is used to line the inside of nuclear reactors. It carries your food, it powers your rockets, and it protects your nuclear cores. It is the ultimate paradox of modern industry. Producing it from raw ore requires massive amounts of energy, but recycling it requires only 5% of that energy. This means that an aluminum, can you throw away today, can be back on a store shelf in just 60 days. It is a perpetual metal. Yet, despite its invisible empire, the true weight of this metal lies not in what it builds, but in what it tells us about value. Paris, 1855. Napoleon III sits at his table, eating from an aluminum plate, surrounded by lesser nobles eating from gold. He believed he was holding the rarest treasure on earth. He was wrong. The treasure was everywhere. It was in the dirt beneath his palace, in the clay of the riverbanks, in the very dust in the air. It was ignored. It was hoarded. It crowned monuments. It launched airplanes. It fueled rockets. The metal did not change. The aluminum in your kitchen drawer is chemically identical to the aluminum Napoleon held in his hands. The only thing that changed was our perspective. We did not invent a new metal. We just figured out how to break its chemical chains. Think about that for a second. The most valuable things in your life right now might not be rare at all. They might just be locked in a form you do not yet understand how to open. Value is an illusion created by scarcity. And scarcity is just a lack of knowledge. Next time you tear off a sheet of aluminum foil to cover your leftovers, remember what you are holding. You are holding a piece of the Earth's crust, a metal that built empires, and a reminder that the line between trash and treasure is often just a matter of electricity. If this story surprised you, subscribe to Common Lore and tell us in the comments which part of aluminum's history surprised you the most. And leave your like so more people can find this video.